Hey up! Right, well, as promised today, the sound test for the Hitchcock's free flow exhaust system on the Classic 350 REborn, and also a little review of that HEELTOE changer that I fitted a few weeks ago. Now, towards the end of the video, I'll be testing the free flow exhaust with baffles out and with baffles in. And there are also quite a lot of questions raised about this particular exhaust in the comments section, so hopefully I can answer most of those questions as well. Now, for once, the conditions were fantastic for filming the sequences for this video. Spring seems to have arrived early. So, starting off with the HEELTOE Gear changer from Hitchcock's. I had a quick chat with Dan at Hitchcock's on WhatsApp yesterday. Apparently they also have a version for this for the old Classic 500. So that's possibly a subject for a video in the future. Let me know what you think. I think it's fair to say that these are a bit of a Marmite accessory. You either love them or you hate them. And whatever your opinion is, they're a bit of a learning curve when you first start to use one. They're a rare sight on a motorcycle these days, but back in the 30s going all the way through until the 1960s, these were de rigueur for any gentleman motorcyclist who used his motorcycle to get to work, where there was a certain dress code. They allow you to change gear easily without scuffing your freshly polished shoes. That is, they allow you to change gear easily when you've got them set up correctly. Now, I set this up correctly from the beginning, but then I went back and messed around with it a bit, trying to get the perfect angle for me, and eventually ended up with it as you see it here. But I should point out, this is not how I had it set up on the sequence that I've filmed. As you can see, I'd levelled the changer out a little bit. When I first rode this bike, it felt like I was having to reach too far with my toes to change down. So I tipped it back a little bit and then found that I'd tipped it way too far back. There was no way that I could change up with my heel. I had to use my toe, so I brought it back home. altered it again by just one more sort of click on the spline, which is how you see it here. Now, changing down was absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever. The problem was when I was changing up with my heel, I was getting no positive feedback from the gear changer. It was sort of a case of having to let the clutch out and give it some throttle to see whether it had changed gear or not. More often than not, it had, but occasionally it wouldn't. You know, I would let the clutch out, give it some revs, and found that I was still in the same gear. So it needed to be altered one click forward again so that it was at more of an angle. This does mean that you have to reach down a little bit further than feels natural to actually change down, but you do actually soon get used to that. Now, everyone's different, and I think what it boils down to is how much flexibility you have when it comes to pushing your heel down. Also, the height of your heel. If you're wearing flat-soled shoes, you may have to angle it even more. It's a completely different technique than it is to, you know, just using a normal sort of toe changer. As Piaget might say, it requires a completely different schemata from the one that you're used to. After a few miles, it becomes second nature. What I found was when I finally adjusted it to the right angle, I got a very positive click with the heel without any effort at all. And I've got to say, these wider touring pegs probably make it a little bit more difficult than it needs to be. I would imagine it'll be far easier to use this heel-toe gear changer with a standard foot peg where you've got a lot more ability to sort of swivel your heel and your toes. At the end of the day, it comes down to, you know, human anatomy, the way our bodies are put together. You've got a lot more flexibility when you're pressing your foot down, pressing your toes down, than you have when you're pressing your heel down. So if you fancy giving these a try, either on your Classic 350 REborn or on your old Classic 500, I would err on the side of caution initially. Tilt the toe peg down with your heel plate about an inch higher than the toe peg. And for most people, I think that will be a good starting point so that you can decide whether you need to adjust it from there. I think what it boils down to is I was too quick to readjust it. I should have given it more time and got used to the concept of using a heel toe before adjusting it. Fit them the way that I showed you in the fitting video, and then give it a good 5 or 10 miles to just get used to, you know, a different way of gear changing before deciding whether or not you need to make any adjustments. On the whole, I'm really happy with these. To me, it makes the bike just that little bit more practical. You know, if you're going out purposely for a day's ride and you're wearing your normal riding boots, it doesn't really matter. But if you're going somewhere special, I don't know, I can't think of an instance, but if you're going somewhere where you want to be dressed smartly when you get there, you want your shoes to be in good condition, as I often do, rather than taking the car because you don't want to scuff your shoes up on the bike, these, I think, represent the best solution. And after all, that's what a heel-toe changer was originally designed to do. Right, so now let's get on to the sound test for this Hitchcock's free flow stainless steel exhaust system. Right, first of all, let's just tackle a few questions that I got in the comments about this exhaust system. First of all, everybody seems to think that it lays or sits a lot lower than the standard exhaust that I took off. It doesn't at all. There is absolutely no chance of this exhaust grounding no matter how far over you bank the bike. In fact, if you bank the bike far enough to scrape your exhaust, your tyres are already off the road, so you know, I wouldn't worry about it. What you have to remember is the diameter on the tubing of this particular pipe, both the downpipe and the silencer itself, is about half of that, maybe even less than half of that, of the original OEM exhaust. So although it may visually look as though there's a bit more space between the silencer and the rear swing arm, and the downpipe and the frame of the bike is all relative, and it's down to the fact that this is of a smaller diameter than the original. Now, I didn't actually take any measurements because it never occurred to me that this would come into the conversation with people, but there were quite a few of you. I would actually say this is probably 1/2 inch to 1 inch higher than the original exhaust was. So you have absolutely no worries in that department. Now, we also had a few people commenting that the exhaust pipe looked like it was drooping down towards the back. That's all down to the camera angles. Unfortunately, I do have some space restrictions when I'm filming on the drive when I'm doing these fitting videos, which often means I have to offset the camera slightly at an angle to try and get the whole view in. And I've got to admit, looking back at that footage, it did give the impression that it did droop, but it doesn't. It's dead straight and horizontal with the road surfaces. This exhaust is exactly as it was intended to be. You know, it goes back to the original Bullet or Classic exhaust systems with a much slimmer, sportier silhouette as they were back in the day. Everything is single skinned, so they don't have to be fatter like the original one does. And there are no additional heat shields, so you know that bulkiness has been lost, which is exactly what I was looking for on this bike. And I know I can trust this exhaust because it's exactly the same system that I fitted to the Mule 4 years ago, and the only difference being the Mule is mild steel that's been chromed, whereas this is stainless steel. And I've had zero issues with the Mule. The reason I brought that into the conversation is that we had quite a few people stating that this exhaust makes the bike run hotter. It doesn't at all. That's a complete contradiction of what a free flow exhaust does. It allows free flow of exhaust gases from the exhaust port and out through the tailpipe. There are fewer obstructions to the gases leaving the exhaust, so it's allowed to run cooler. Because the exhaust gases are not lingering in a sort of labyrinth of baffles, filters and traps of the like that you have inside a catalytic converter. They're just allowed to go straight through and straight out. Now, the problem was with each of these people that stated that, when I asked them how they'd come to that conclusion, they were unable to tell me. You know, they weren't able to tell me what the differences in temperature were between running this exhaust and the original exhaust because they hadn't measured it. It was just something that seemed to be set in the heads that it runs hotter. Now, I think part of this is the fact that obviously you don't have a double-skinned exhaust. So the surfaces of the exhaust itself will get hotter quicker because you don't have that double sort of insulating skin that helps it feel cooler on the outside. Nor do you have all those additional heat shields. You know, it's just common sense that there's going to be a tactile difference between this and the OEM system because you're effectively insulated from the heat on the OEM system. Now, another thing that came into the conversation was there's a smaller channel that has made a series of videos on the Classic 350 REborn. Very well produced videos, I've got to say. And in one of those videos, he was comparing the temperature of the engine running this particular exhaust system with the same system run with a Fuel X device fitted. And apparently a Fuel X device does cool the engine down somewhat because it's running richer. I say apparently because I've got a Fuel X system that I've had for quite some time waiting to go on this bike, and I've not had a chance to actually test it myself as yet. Now, I think what had happened through people watching this video, and it's something that I get quite often on my videos, people just not engaging their brains or listening properly to what's been said. The guy was demonstrating the cooling effects that the Fuel X system had when run in conjunction with this exhaust system. He wasn't saying that the exhaust system was making the bike run hot, I was trying to demonstrate was that the Fuel-X device made it run cooler, but that's not the takeaway that a lot of people came away from that video with. They were basically putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 6,527 as an answer. This pipe does not make the bike run hotter. But due to the way that it's being constructed, once you shut the engine off, this exhaust system cools down a lot faster than the OEM exhaust did. Now, noise and performance. To my ear, this exhaust doesn't really sound much louder than the OEM pipe. And for once, if I'm honest, I couldn't tell much difference between running it with the baffle in or baffle out. The noise level is about the same, but it does change the tone. It gives the bike a much deeper, more baritone voice. Without the baffle in, it's got a more sort of woody resonance. And when you put the baffle back in, it sharpens the tone up a little bit. But if I'm honest, the difference between the two is negligible. Now, performance-wise, this system isn't going to affect the top-end speed of the bike because it's electronically governed by the ECU. But because the engine's breathing out better, it definitely spins up quicker, so acceleration is better, it copes with hills better, and overtaking slower vehicles doesn't feel quite as laboured. I would say there's something like 10 to 20% increase in acceleration. But don't forget, I also have the DNA Stage 2 intake system fitted on this bike, which is obviously going to alter the way it performs as well. So that increase might not be quite as notable if you leave the OEM air filter in and just make this conversion. As it stands at the moment, I've not had sufficient time to, ascertain whether or not it affects fuel consumption. Right, so now for the flyby sound test, first of all with baffles out, because I figured it would be easier to put cold baffles into a hot exhaust than it would be to take a hot baffle out of a hot exhaust. I carried this test out on my favourite S-bend because it forces you to change down a couple of gears and then put the bike under load, so you get a good sort of broad spectrum of different exhaust acoustics and notes. Generally speaking, I enter this bend at between 40 and 45 miles an hour in top gear. I change down into third gear and then accelerate away. I'm sorry about the wind noise, it's unavoidable in this location, and yes, I do have a windsock on the camera, but it doesn't dial all of it out. Here we go, this is the return, baffles out. Right, so once that run was done, we put the baffles back in and repeated exactly the same run, same gears, same speeds. Here we go. Right, so that's it. I've done my very best with what I have and the weather conditions and everything to cover absolutely everything everybody could possibly want to know, apart from the odd Victor Meldrew who'll pick on something. I'm sure he will. As I hope you can pick up in these videos, this was not a hooligan exhaust pipe. It just provides the bike with more authentic vintage acoustics. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I would also appreciate it if you would leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. You can assist the channel in other ways if you wish to do so via my Patreon page or via the super thanks button down below. Either way, it's much appreciated. I will of course be back on Friday, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.